Richard Branson, hello.
Hello.
Welcome home.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to see Virgin Radio and to see the way it's grown up from its very, very, very early days.
You were talking earlier, we had a quick chat about when you met Chris Evans and you spoke to him when Virgin Radio UK originally came. Concorde was involved, is that right?
Yeah, I obviously would never dream of flying British Airways, but in order to sign Chris Evans, he happened to be on a Concorde flight, and I quickly booked a ticket for the back seat and then walked to the front cabin to give him a contract and sit there and persuade him to come and switch to Virgin Radio, which somehow I managed to do.
Amazing.
And he left briefly and went to the BBC, and I was actually doing a BBC radio interview with him one day, and at the end of the interview, live on his radio show, I said, Chris, look, you're going to have to come back to Virgin. And he said, I think we better not talk about it on radio on BBC. And afterwards we had a chat and he came back again. So there's been two occasions where we've managed to drag him back to his right home, and now he's firmly in his right home.
And you must be so proud, because there's Virgin Radio UK here, there's Virgin Radios all around the world now, and I've been in the radio industry for 26 years. This is single-handedly the most fun place I've ever worked. The creativity here, and your work ethos is ingrained within us, and it's a really great place to work. So thank you, boss.
No. It's a pleasure. No, it's definitely one of my proudest babies, and lovely to hear it in Dubai or many countries around the world whenever one visits, so it's delightful.
We are really happy for you to be here doing my playlist. This is a bit of a different show because we're kind of co-presenting this together, and lots of these songs mean so much to you through the Virgin business and the enterprise. And we start with Mike Oldfield. Now, I thought you'd ask for this song. This takes you right the way back, doesn't it? To explain the importance of this.
Yeah, so we didn't have a record company, but we heard Mike Oldfield's music. He was 15 years old. He played all the instruments himself. It was hauntingly beautiful. And I took his tape to 7 record companies. They all turned it down. And so we thought, screw it, let's do it. We'll start a record company and put this album out ourselves. And Tubular Bells became one of the biggest albums in history.
That song was just so unique because it was instrumental, and you really had to work hard, like you say, to get the track kind of noticed. And also, Mike didn't want to do interviews, I read somewhere, so that was quite a struggle right at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had to do a lot of interviews down the phone, pretending to be Mike Oldfield himself.
Really?
And so I had front page splashes in Melody Maker and Sounds and Enemy and other. Anyway, and then I remember we managed to get the BBC to do a massive big concert for him at the QE2 and Queen Elizabeth Hall. And on the way there, he just said, "Richard, I can't do it." And it was going to be filmed by the BBC, and my parents had given me this beaten up old Bentley as a wedding present, and I was driving him there, and I said, "You just psychologically can't do it?" And he said, "No, I can't do it." And I said, "Well, Mike, if I give you the keys to this car, will you carry on with it?" And there was a pause, and he said, "Yeah, I think I can get over my psychological problems."
So he did it.
He did it, and that that concert, broadcast all over the world on television, really propelled him into number one.
Yeah. Now, your next track on Virgin Radio UK is Sex Pistols. Such an important band. Is it true that you first saw them play in the 100 Club in London? And tell me how you felt after watching them in action.
So there was a small group of people in the 100 Club. There was about 80 people crammed into this small room, and they were absolutely electric, exciting. I mean, people had spit all over them. It was, and I thought, if we could sign this band, it will shake up the industry, but it'll also shake up Virgin Records, which was, known as a bit of a hippie record label at the time, and that they could be the next generation of the Rolling Stones. I mean, they were outrageous, so they were hitting the front pages of all the newspapers, and in the same way that the Rolling Stones did when they were very young. And so I was determined to try to sign them. EMI, it seems, had already got a contract out, and so we missed them the first day. They then went on the Bill Grundy show. There was a lot of expletives. EMI dropped them. We then were about to sign them when A&M doubled the offering. They then went to A&M and threw up over the desks, and A&M dropped them. And then finally we got them signed. And I mean, I found all their songs unbelievably strong, but let's try Anarchy in the UK, which will give you a taste of what they're all about.
Let's do it. As we heard that song, Richard Branson's with me, my playlist. There's pictures of you on board that boat opposite the Houses of Parliament, isn't there? What was that night like? Wasn't that with the Queen's Jubilee going on?
It was the Queen's Jubilee, and they had. And they were performing a concert opposite the House of Commons, and it was like an alternative Jubilee party. I mean, they didn't believe in the monarchy, and they had every right to speak out against it. They did a song called God Save the Queen, which was an alternative rendition of God Save the Queen, and the police decided to raid the boat and close the concert down, and Malcolm McLaren was arrested, and of course what it actually did was hit the headlines, and the Sex Pistols became even better known, and their albums, Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, sold even more.
The rest was history.
And I mean, there's another story which maybe I'm spending a bit too much time on one band, but we were then arrested for the word for the album sleeve, the word bollocks, and we had to get a linguistics expert who happened to be a priest from Nottingham University to come to court to explain that the word bollocks was not a derivative of what the police thought it was, but actually it was a nickname given to priests in the 18th century, and the literal meaning of the album was "Never mind the priests, here's the Sex Pistols."
Did it work?
It worked, and they were the magistrates very reluctantly, quote, find you not guilty.
Amazing. Let's move on to your next song. Another important band. You've picked the Human League.
Yeah, so Phil Oakey fell in love with this waitress in a bar, and he pursued her, and he failed, and one of the first songs that the Human League put out on Virgin was Don't You Want Me, and I find it just one of the most beautiful songs I've ever listened to.
Can you remember, Richard, after hearing that great song, you remember when you first heard the Human League? It's interesting to know these bands, because you've always said you didn't know that much about music as a kind of not really a muso, but when you first heard that song, did you know it was special before it became so synonymous with the band and so popular?
Yeah, one thing I think I was good at was knowing what I liked and what I didn't like. What I didn't have was, because I left school at 15 and I've been working since I was 15, I didn't have those years of smoking pot and listening to music at university or college that other people at Virgin had. So I had to sometimes draw on them to say, look, I love this music, but is it a derivative of something else? And they would say it was or it wasn't. But when I heard the Human League, I instantaneously loved them, and I still I play a lot of tennis. I have the music, playing in the background, and still thoroughly enjoy it.
Now, I suppose it's about a decade later that you signed the Rolling Stones, didn't you? And they're next on the list. Tell me about the Stones. They played a big part in the whole Virgin enterprise, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think that it was 30 odd years ago that we signed the Rolling Stones. I remember when we signed them, people saying, "You can't sign this band; they're too old." I mean, they'll they may not even be able to make the record. They're that old.
How old were they at the time? Can you remember? This would have been about 92, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's they were 35 years younger than they are today, and I'm going to see a Stones concert in a couple of months' time. So, Keith Richards was. He would come to the Manor, which is a country recording studio we had to record, and the Stones would come. And there was one day that Keith Richards was in the house somewhere, and there was a massive bang on the front, this big old 16th century front door, and I went to the door and opened it. There's this gigantic guy out there with a gun, and in England, as we know, nobody carries guns. And I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, "I've come to kill Keith Richards." And so I said, "Well, look, why have you come to kill Keith Richards?" And he said, "Because I believe he's in your house with my wife." And so just as he said it, I could see a naked Keith Richards and a naked woman running behind him across the lawn. And so I said, "Look, I assure you he's not in our house. Put the gun down and just come and walk around the house, and you'll find that there's no Keith Richards here." Anyway, that's what he did, and he apologized afterwards, and he left. And about 2 hours later, Keith Richards comes sheepishly back into the house. But anyway, Keith Richards is still alive. I mean,
How's that happened?
That is extraordinary. But I mean, the wonderful thing with all these wonderful musicians is that they're, unlike the rest of us, their music will live on for generations to come, and they should be really, really proud of what they've created.
Are you enjoying this?
I'm thoroughly enjoying it, going down memory lane. I just spent a couple of weeks. It takes a long time sitting in a makeshift studio that I created with mattresses in the basement of my house. I had no air conditioning on, and I'm in the Caribbean, and I'm sweating, and I have a bucket underneath me, and I'm going reading Losing and Finding My Virginity, because I think if you do an audiobook, you should do it yourself.
Yeah.
And I was remembering stories that I'd completely forgotten, and actually thoroughly enjoying it, despite that if I sometimes sort of glancing in the mirror and thinking if anybody could see me here sitting pretty well naked in my own makeshift recording studio.
How long did it take you to do that, the audiobook?
Well, I do warn people, it's quite. I've lived a long life, but I would suggest that people sort of dive into the chapters that interest them and leave out the rest. But it was anyway. It was a couple of weeks on and off, and it's I think it's a lovely thing to have for one's children and grandchildren, and I honestly believe that most people listening to this have a book in them. I mean, I think if you keep notes and keep a diary, it's so nice that that your grandkids can one day read about your life, and it's great, just for the family, if nothing else.
Of course, and congratulations, it's fascinating.
Thank you.
It's really, really great, as you would expect. I remember, we're going to go on to Culture Club now on Virgin Radio. I remember reading Boy George's book in the 90s called Take It Like a Man, and he spoke about how important your role was within his early part of the career when things weren't going well. Obviously, you've kind of been through thick and thin. There have been twists and turns over this. Tell me more about Boy George and the struggle that he was going through at the beginning.
So when we first signed Culture Club, Boy George had everything. He was charismatic. He looked fantastic. He wrote great songs. He sang beautifully. He performed beautifully. I mean, everything rolled into one. He disliked intensely the idea of people taking drugs. He was. He was sort of perfection encompassed all in one artist, and he had gigantic success. Not right out of the box. I think "Karma Chameleon" was the fourth single we put out, but that then exploded all over the world. But he then did hit drugs, and he started losing friends in his flat, I was lucky. When I was young, I'd run an advisory centre for young people who had problems, and one of the problems obviously was drugs. And so I took him to my house in the country with a wonderful lady called Meg, and she set about trying to get him off heroin, and then sadly the police found out and they raided the house, and we snuck out the back door, and we crossed the field crawling with Meg walked because she was only about 4 foot tall, but the rest of the two of us were crawling through long grass. Ultimately, they caught up with him, and I thought that it was disgraceful that the press really, hounded them to arrest him, and that set him back a bit. But then he finally managed to get off drugs, and he's still a great friend. He's still doing extraordinary things. One of the most wonderful DJs. And he should be incredibly proud of the fact that he pulled himself together.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there were scary times. It wasn't always necessarily going to work, was it? I mean,
no. That
performance on Clapham Common, he looked really scarily ill, scarily sick, didn't he?
Yeah. No, I mean, he came very, very, very close, but he was, either he was one of the lucky ones, but he also made his own luck in getting himself out of it.
Some great songs, Richard Branson. It was always going to be great, Richard, your selection of songs. I hear that you changed this selection a few times as well, so thank you for taking it so seriously.
No, well, it's Virgin Radio, of course.
So we go from Culture Club to Simple Minds, another massive band. Tell me more about Jim Kerr and the Boys and this song.
So I heard the raw demo tapes with Simon Draper, who's was the force behind Virgin Records, and loved what I heard, and rang Jim Kerr's home, and his mother answered the phone. And I said, "It's Richard Branson here," and she went, "Oh, something," and put the phone down on me.
Nice.
And then I rang back again, and she put the phone down on me again. And then I rang again, and I said, "Look, it's really Richard Branson. I wonder whether I could talk to Jim Kerr, your son." And then she started questioning me, and realised that it was me, and then she got quite excited, and I talked to Jim, and. Anyway, somehow persuaded them to sign with Virgin, and Don't You Forget About Me was one of their early tracks with us, and again it propelled them into a superstardom, and all these bands were helping propel Virgin into becoming the biggest independent record company in the world, and Simple Minds played a big part in that.
Do you remember when you first heard this song for the very first time?
I heard it on a houseboat that I lived on, and Simon came and played it to me, and I lived on a houseboat in Little Venice where I worked, and had my young kids and lovely lady Joan, and yeah, it was definitely one of those songs that. Felt like it could work.
Richard, I just want to quickly mention, we, for the 4th year this year, Virgin Radio Pride is coming back, and it's a station that celebrates diversity, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. It's been the most amazing opportunity to speak to people, to be honest. When I was a young lad coming out, I could have just dreamt of having this experience of being on a national radio station, a platform where you can be yourself and you can be honest. And it just reminds me with this Janet Jackson song, this means so much to the LGBTQ plus community. Tell me why you've picked this song, and do you realise its significance?
Well, just before I do that, I remember when I was first in London, age 16, 17, and we set up this centre, and a lot of gay people would come to us from Swansea or Glasgow or out in the sticks, and as a sort of naive 15, 16-year-old, I first of all, the very first person I saw, I remember thinking that they don't want to be gay, they want to be I don't know, they want to be straight. Anyway, very quickly I realized that people are born gay, and they are lonely, they want to meet other people just like the rest of us, and so so we started making sure that we had a community of gay people where they could meet each other, and then ultimately we started to have a nightclub, which became the main place that gay people could meet, and I think the war for gay people has largely been won in America and Europe. Africa, Russia, it's still horrendous, and I'm afraid it's actually some of the religious zealots from America that have gone to Africa and stirred it up in Uganda and other places. So there's still work to be done. But on Janet Jackson, she came to England, and I was trying to. Everybody wanted to sign her, and I took her hot air ballooning over Oxford, and I'd only just learned to fly a hot air balloon. I was trying to fly around the world in a hot air balloon, which was a little bit mad
and very scary. I seem to remember,
and extremely scary. But you'll have to read the book for that one. And then as we were flying over Oxford, I told her that if she didn't sign with Virgin, I would use her as ballast, and otherwise we wouldn't get over Oxford. And so she agreed to sign with us, and Together Again was one of the early tracks that we put out from her, and yeah, as you say, she's been a great champion,
a wonderful ally, hasn't she?
Wonderful ally, yeah.
We're going to swerve into Ed Sheeran now on your playlist. The A-Team, wonderful song.
So this is the first band that wasn't a Virgin band, but I choose it because my daughter went into a concert and saw this young guy play, and it was one of his very, very, very first concerts, and went up to him after the concert and said, I'm getting married on Necker Island. Would you mind coming and playing? And he said he'd be delighted. He then put out the A-Team, and it exploded. And we honestly thought that he'd have to cancel. Everybody wanted him, but he stuck by his promise. He flew out to Necker. He cancelled other engagements, and the family have become great friends of his, and just watched his success with in awe. But it was just the kindness of him not sticking with what he'd promised that we'll always appreciate.
And he's one of the artists that we really, really should be proud of, because he can do it all, can't he? He's just like a really great example of a Brit at their best.
Yeah, absolutely. And he and his wife are incredibly caring people who I think really want to make a difference as well. So, he's in a position to make a difference, and he's going to, not just for his music, but in other ways as well. A
very important track. I've been dying to ask you about this Peter Gabriel track. This has so much kind of historical significance, doesn't it? And I heard it last night again, and it kind of brought tears to my eyes. It's so powerful. But the story behind this, the apartheid, and please tell me more about this song.
So Peter and I have been close for a very, very long time. I was once in South Africa after Mandela had just been released from prison, and we were putting up a statue to a man called Steve Biko in a place called East London outside Cape Town, and with Mandela and Archbishop Tutu and some others, and there were 100,000 Africans in the crowd in the streets, and there was Mandela, and we were on the corner of the stage, and Mandela made this passionate speech about Steve Biko, who'd been killed in a white prison before, when apartheid still existed, and after he finished the speech, I went up to him and said, can I borrow your microphone? And then I announced that Peter was going to sing the song Biko to the whole crowd, and Peter did not know anything about this. and then I handed the microphone to Peter, and he, the whole 100,000 people sang along with him this song Biko, and it was one of the most moving moments of my life, and both of our lives, and all of our lives, I think, who were there, and we went on to develop, Peter and I, an incredible relationship with Mandela, who we attempted to stop the Iraq War, which we both felt passionately was a terrible mistake, and we'd managed to persuade Saddam Hussein to step down and go and live in Libya if Mandela came and flew out with him, and then sadly the bombing started just before that trip took place.
So that could have happened, could it? Then? It was
very, 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 within 24 hours of happening. So it was one of those few regrets I've had in my life, but out of that we went on to form the Elders together, and the Elders have. Now they have Mary Robinson running them, but the Kofi Annan has run them, Mandela's run them, Archbishop Tutu's run them, and they do go into conflicts and try to resolve conflicts. And Peter and I and another group of people help work with them. But Biko, I think Biko was there to try to express an incredible sadness about. On behalf of all black people who were treated abysmally by white people for decades, and it sums up the sadness of somebody losing their life in prison in Africa.
Richard, can I just chuck at you a couple of questions? First question is, what's your proudest moment? Is that a huge question? I think, I've been 48 years with Joan, and I think we've just been very lucky that we found each other, and that our relationship has worked so well, and that we've had some wonderful children and wonderful grandchildren, and wonderful group of friends, and so that has made everything else possible, just that the togetherness of the family, and then we have the Virgin family, which there's been something like 1.5 million people who've worked for Virgin in my lifetime, and they've created wonderful companies. This year is the 40th anniversary of Virgin Atlantic. That's incredible, isn't it?
And we started with one plane. Nobody thought we'd last a year. And British Airways went to extraordinary lengths to put us out of business. And I think there's a feature film's being made called the Dirty Tricks campaign, which is coming out about the lengths they went. So here we are at Virgin Radio. It's set up all throughout the world, so Virgin has spawned a lot of great companies that I think have made a positive difference to people's lives. And I suppose one of my ultimately ultimate success is the thing. The day most likely the most memorable day was going to space, and that was a dream that I'd had ever since watching the moon landing, and a day I will forever remember.
Do you think we'll all get the chance to do that at some point?
I'm sure. Yes, not in my lifetime, but we will leave. I'll leave behind a number of spaceships, and hopefully, if the demand is what I think it will be, they'll be building a lot more, and in time the price will come down, so more and more people will be able to have that wonderful experience.
Let's get back to your music. UB40 next. I'm so glad you put UB40. Such trailblazers. Tell me more about these guys.
So UB40, reggae music was, we had a reggae label called The Front Line, with, the Mighty Diamonds and the Gladiators and Peter Tosh and others, and one of the bands that Virgin signed was UB40, and red wine, obviously with the Virgin logo being red. I think Virgin Voyages, our cruise company, have used it as their anthem when we came out of COVID, which was a torrid time if you're in the cruise business and just launched a cruise company, but they used it to celebrate the fact that people could come on cruises and could fly on airlines again, and I think just Red Wine's a really joyful song. I
kind of predicted that you would play. You picked John Lennon on your playlist. I think you said that this song has your favourite lyrics of all time. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I mean, John Lennon was, alongside Paul McCartney, and it was one of the greatest songwriters ever. And when I was a teenager, I went to Apple to ask him whether he would do a record for our magazine, and he agreed. He and Yoko agreed to make a record which would go on the front cover of our magazine. So I printed 100,000 copies, and then somehow the record never came. And I went down to Apple, and they finally said, we have the John and Yoko record for you. And I went into the studio, and there was boom, 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 and then it suddenly stopped after 3 minutes, and Yoko Ono burst into tears, and I said, "I'm not quite sure what's happening." And Derek Taylor whispered to me that was the heartbeat of Yoko Ono's baby, and that was when it stopped. That was when the baby died inside her. Wow. And I left, and I thought, I don't think I can put it out, and I'm still not sure whether I made the right decision, but we decided not to go with it. But it was definitely a poignant moment. So rather than playing that, which I don't have, I thought I'll play Imagine, which was just a most wonderful song ever.
Yeah, what an incredible song. Those lyrics still mean so much now, don't they? I am dying to ask you about the Spice Girls, because Victoria Beckham celebrated her 50th recently. They're going back out on tour, can you believe it, 40th anniversary show. Tell me about how the Spice Girls phenomenon started.
So I will remember we had just signed the Spice Girls, and we were going to, and I flew with them to Spain, to Madrid, to play in the Virgin Records shop. This was their first concert, and we thought we'd play them well away from UK and let them have some practice in Spain. So I went with them, and there was just the five girls and myself, and we had such a fun time flying down to Spain. And then we flew back, and we arrived back about 2:00 in the morning at Heathrow, and we walked through a completely deserted airport, and and we were laughing and joking, and I was thinking, wow, life's pretty damn good. You know, here I am with these 5 fun girls, and never ever dreamt, I don't think, that they were going to explode in the way they did.
There must have been something about them, though.
Oh yeah, no, they were just full of life.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, just full of life, full of the joy of life, and all getting on great, and just enjoying. I think perhaps being with Virgin Records and having been signed, and hoping for a great future, which they all individually have done, and as a band collectively did.
Natalie Imbruglia Torn, which for me is the song of one of the songs of the 90s, and gets so much radio play all these years later. What a song! What a song!
No, it's just incredible. I mean, I remember. So this was not one that we put out, but I was sitting at the Brits Awards with my wife, and this girl came on stage, and my brain said, "This is the most beautiful girl I've ever seen." And then I looked to my wife and said, I mean, apart obviously from her, but then fortunately my wife said that is the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and out loud, and I sort of nodded as if I hadn't really thought about it before.
I suppose she is.
And the next day, her manager rang me on the houseboat and said, Natalie's trying to get into your hotel in Mallorca. It's full up. Is there anything you can do about it? So I paused for a moment and said, let me try. And then I rang her back and said, no, it is full up, but we're going to Necker tomorrow. Would she like to come with us there instead? And then I rang my wife back up and said, you know, the girl you thought was the most beautiful girl we've ever seen, she's coming with us to Necker tomorrow. Anyway,
how did that go down?
She was great about it. She said and that's one of the reasons I think we're together. She's just a wonderful free soul, not free in that way, but free soul, and she became a great friend of my son Sam's, and a great friend of the family, and has been friends ever since.
Got 2 tracks left. I can't wait to reveal your final song. I've got a few questions about the final artist, but right now I'm so glad you put Bowie down on the list. What an important artist, and you must have a few reasons why you want this particular song.
Well, I had difficulty with David Bowie. Absolute Beginners was a record that we put out on Virgin, and we also made the film Absolute Beginners, and it's a beautiful song, but Space Oddity, because it helped inspire me to want to go to space myself, has to be the song I think I'll choose for now. But if later on you can play Absolute Beginners again, I'm sure people would love to hear it again. But yeah, space has played an important part in my life, and David Bowie was a really delightful artist to have had and got to know, and a very, 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 very important part of Virgin.
And as we go into this, can I just ask you a weird question that's popped into my head? What's space like?
Well, it's infinite, no, but it's more what's the Earth like? The Earth is. I mean, I've seen the Earth, like ballooning across the Himalayas, Mount Everest, K2. I've seen the Earth in all its beauty from 50,000 feet from a hot air balloon, and seeing it from space, you see more of it. You realize how much of the world is water, and how much of the world is still unspoiled and there to be protected. We have an extraordinary world. I mean, more extraordinary than any other planet we know about. And just I think it's wonderful that the world is waking up to realise that we've got to protect all the species on it, and we've got to treat it better than it's been treated in the past.
This has been incredible. I really hope you've enjoyed it. It's been great to be in your company, and a different kind of interview, because to present your own radio show on Virgin Radio is a very special thing. So thank you for coming in and doing it.
Well, thank you for making it so easy. I presume you're now going to ask me what your
final track is. I mean, I know it, and as soon as I saw this list, I was like, that is immense. That's brilliant.
Well, it's obviously my go-to karaoke song is Like a Virgin.
Yes. Interesting you picked Madonna. I saw Madonna's celebration tour recently, the 40 years. She's such a kind of forward-facing artist. But to look back on some of those pivotal moments, and the fact, as I said, as a gay person growing up in the 90s, we had no role models, but she was that person. When I went through difficult days and I got home and there'd been bullying and remarks and you felt that no one had your back, she was there for us. And I often think that she's the kind of artist that you would like, that you would respect and admire.
No, I mean, she's... and as an artist, as a female artist, she keeps reinventing herself, and she kept reinventing herself, and she's still as relevant today as she was 40 years ago. So, which is difficult, more difficult for women, I think, than men, and in life generally, sadly.
As we go into this song, one final question: what's next for you?
What's next? Most of my time is now spent on the issues of the world, and using my ability to be able to sort of pick up the phone and get through to people to try to address problems. And so that the last 12 months I've been spending a lot of time on Ukraine. I've been to Kiev twice, spent time with Zelensky. I've been working hard to try to get Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, to get a vote, and going through to try to get Ukraine the necessary support that it needs, and so there's quite a lot of issues going on in the world where I think being outside politics but being in an influential position, you can make a difference, and I don't want to waste the position I find myself in. So we'll see how it goes.
Richard Branson, thank you, for coming in. Thank you for making such a difference to our lives, and also thank you for being amazing. And we're going to end with your karaoke song. I won't let you know what happens because we're going to move the microphone down.
Like a virgin.
Really great to be
Kissed
a real
for the very first
carrying
time.
on. I love this.
Like a right, okay, no more.
I wasn't expecting that. Richard Branson, you're amazing. Thank you so
very
much.
much.